Okay, I'll try to do this really quick. So first, I'm just going to cover how to convert the cameras, the stereo cameras, so that they map correctly while using RenderMan for the Cyclorama. So I have a basic scene with a checkerboard sphere, and I've got a RenderMan area light, sphere light right in there. We're going to go up and create, just so you can see how to do this manually, and then in a second I'll show you a rig that I've created that you can use for your scene. So, stereo camera, and if I look through that rig, through the center, this is what it looks like projection-wise. And we'll look at this in a second, but let me just show you the IPR for this. All right. So this does I'm not even sure what the mapping here is. Basically just a really wide angle lens. Focal length is 4. The angle of view is 154. I don't know, like I'm not sure why that. It does create, if we look underneath here, creating a center camera. So I'm going to jump back out, perspective. You can see I have one camera here and then a left and a right. And if I click on the links here, there is a node controlling the field of view in the vertical and the horizontal, the camera separation, which is 6.5, which I think is the default that the Dome Master 3D uses, as well as the parallax distance. So I'm not going to worry about explaining that stuff for here. So, but if I do the render, you can see I get this. This is not correct. This is not what we want, as best I can tell, for the Cyclorama. It's not going to give us the 360 that we want for the left and the right. And again, as I'm doing this tutorial, I'm just going to be looking through the center, and then you would have to make modifications for those two when you set up your big render. All right, so let's go back and let's pause that guy. Did it pause? Yeah. All right, so let's select the camera, and we want to add Pixar RenderMan attributes to this. So attributes, RenderMan, manage attributes, and there are 3 things that we need. I'm going to hold down Command so I can get the vertical sweep and the type and the horizontal sweep, and I'll just click Add. Okay, so those are now in the scene, and if I scroll down to the bottom, extra RenderMan attributes. Always clicking and sliding in Maya, drives me crazy. Type get from camera, and we'll say spherical. And now that we've selected spherical, you can see the horizontal sweep is 360 and the vertical sweep is 180. So let's go back to our little IPR and we'll fire off a new one. Oops. All right, my bad. And we need to make sure we're looking through the right camera. And we'll just, you can, with the little render viewer, you can just click on IPR in the Maya status bar up here, and it will kick off the RenderMan. So you can see that at 360, 180, so I know there's 20 checkerboards all the way across. So, and I've counted this before, there are full 20, so it's going around 360, but it's not quite doing the full vertical yet. And we could change that if we wanted to. Let's just make that, let's just crank it out, 360, come back to it. And you can see now I have the full resolution, and trust me, this is basically the North Pole, and this is the South Pole, and everything's mapped out and stretched accordingly to fit that kind of grid view. Okay, so let's, you can see some, oops, that's the one we didn't want. All right, so let's just quit that. And so that's the example. If you wanted to do this on your own, you would have to add those attributes for each one of these 2 cameras. And then if you're really slick, you can just go back to the center camera and use the connection editor so that the attributes here control the left and the right. Okay, so let's go to my camera rig. And Cyclorama camera rig, I think this is the right file. Okay, what the hell is this, right? So part of it is I wanted, as Thomas had done, kind of a UV grid. that we could evaluate. So I extruded these a little bit so I would have some geometry to work with. Now, I also created this crazy cone, and I'll explain this here in a second. So that is the Dane Camera Rig RM for RenderMan, and we have the cameras themselves, which are sitting right there. So if you had to animate those, so this is, you'd have to do something a little different and reorder this. I'm assuming that you're just going to have this as a stationary camera. So there are the cameras, and they've all been hooked up to each other so that when I make changes to this little controller that I'm going to show you in a second, they all propagate down into the cameras themselves. Let's turn off shapes. All right, 4, 5, 6. So why this dome? Well, the dome in here is a way of visualizing what is going to be in the camera view. So here we go. Right? So, and this is not the easiest viewer, but it's a complicated thing to figure out what you're looking at, right? If you're doing full 360 in the Cyclorama. So this is the best thing I could figure to do. So let's go into the panel here, and let's go ahead and fire off a little IPR. Okay, so you can see something similar, and the reason again that I extruded those is so we can see what would happen with shadowing if I was doing indirect light or something. So this is going a full 360, F7, 8, 9, blah, 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 goes all the way to 20 and starts again. So this is kind of the seam where the UV map was laid on. And then over here to F6, and it picks back up. You can see it's getting cut off in the vertical. There's more letters above F and below O here, okay? But as a default for that camera rig that I showed you a second ago, when you put the RenderMan controls in there, let's pause. I don't want to move my camera. As a default, it only goes 180, and I'm assuming what this is like is, so if we look at it from the top, this is a full 360, but if we look from the side, this is 90 degrees and another 90 degrees. So that's the 180, I'm assuming, that we're getting out of that render. So what I did is created this little controller for everyone. So there's a little red curve up here. If we go to the channel box, we can change its scale, okay? So depending on how big or small our world is, and if we need more room for big objects or small objects, we can change that. But I've also created custom attributes for the vertical sweep control. So if I click on that, you can see I can scale down, and in fact, I'll just do it numerically. And I know it's hard to see, but it's right there, okay? So why do this? How is this helping us? So it only goes between 180 and 360, but this controller changes the vertical sweep for all the cameras, the center and the left and the right. So this should work. The main thing is I want to figure out how this maps onto the Cyclorama. So if we need to change this angle to best suit whatever Cyclorama does, or if we can change Cyclorama to use a different vertical sweep, I wanted to be able to do that. So let's go back into the IPR. And so there's that render here. In fact, oops, sorry, let's go back. Keep doing that. There we go. And to make things easy, I'm gonna make this window a little bit better there. Close my little windows here. All right, so you can see we're getting the same render set up. Now let's go back to the frustum control, and let's make that 360. We'll fire off another IPR. Okay, so what has happened now is in that dome, or that sphere that has the top and the bottom cut off, you can see we're getting all of the panels plus the darkness. And then if I zoom in here, you can see this gray pixel that's running across here. That's actually the little sphere that's in the scene. If I go go back up to perspective, you can see I put a little sphere at the top and the bottom. That is that. And that white is the last little remaining sliver of those cones that I have in there, right? So here it was at 180. Here's the frustum and the vertical sweep of 360. And let's, we're going to measure so you can see how this works. Oops, I did it again. Gotta remember to keep toggling back there. Okay. All right, so the same thing here. You can see now it's not ending at F7. It's showing us 3 more blocks. But if we zoom in here, we can see there's that little bit of white, and that is the edge of those cones, my little 360 view frustum, okay? So hopefully this could help you diagnose your own scene and what you're trying to render, and also us dial in how the cyclorama itself works, right? All right, so let's go back and just one quick overview. So all this is underneath one group. We just have the cameras. I would not move them in this setup, so you can figure out what's going on, just animate things around it. And then we also have the little controller that we can use here. So let's go back to its default 180. So as you think about it, if you, and in fact I'm thinking about you, if you were animating creatures moving around the cameras, this would be the idea of what the cameras themselves would see in the render. I still don't know if cyclorama would do even more cutting. And of course, if we only see it on one half of the cyclorama, we don't need 25% on either side of this, but this should help us diagnose what we're looking at while we render. Okay, I will post this video and send you this file in a little project folder so you also have the image that goes with it that I'm using. Happy rendering.